Hi everyone, my name's Neerav, and today we're talking with Alex, who has two Teslas, about doing EV road trips across the eastern states of Australia and across to Adelaide as well from Sydney. Hi
Yeah,
Alex, when you're on road trips on screen at the moment, which car is this from yours?
that's the Model 3.
So you've had that for a touch over 3 years. How have you found it for going on long trips across the country? I think you went to Adelaide.
We've been to Melbourne. We've been up the Gold Coast. We had originally swapped out the BMW M2 because that was a coupe. And then we thought we'd keep the X3 because that's like a full drive SUV thing for trips. And we'd just have the Model 3. But then the weekend we bought it, we went straight down to Kiama, went through Kangaroo Valley and all through the twisty roads there. And I was totally impressed with that. You barely touched the brakes because you're the regen.
Yes.
Well, that's actually a great trip car. And then we end up selling the X3. So we end up with just no BMWs, just, we have the Model Y.
Yeah.
Picked right there now. We went up the Pacific Motorway all the way up to Tweed Heads. And then on the way back, we came inland through Lismore and it's the Bruxton Highway. So that's quite a windy sort of road in through. We stayed in Armidale on the way back and then back through Thunderbolt. I don't know if you know Thunderbolt's Way.
So it's good to show people in a long range Tesla and other long range EVs, you don't actually have to stop that many times.
That's true. On the way up, we stopped and there's green there and there's red. So red would be the supercharging stops. So,
Yep.
And that's there and back. So mind you, the first stop from Sydney was in Taree.
Yep.
And that's about a 3-hour drive or so. And we stopped there for 16 minutes to recharge. So then we drove on to Coffs Harbour and we had to wait for 30 minutes for the charge. Mind you, that's an older version 2 supercharger, so slightly slower than some of the newer ones, but we had to have lunch as well. So that all took, by the time you go into the shopping centre, buy the lunch, we actually bought Aussie thongs. So we had time to do a little bit of shopping. It only took 5 minutes, but basically by the time that it was all done, we're like 90%, which was overcharged actually. So that's what it's showing now. That's the Coffs Harbour to Tweed Heads. Yeah. So we had it, 89%. Then at that point, and then we got to Tweed Heads with, 24%, still like a quarter of a tank, let's say. And we charged in Tweed Heads, but only because we're staying in Tweed. Friends of ours got a place there. And we ended up just topping it up to whatever it was, 80% or something. There's the costing. That's the supercharging prices.
It would have compared to your previous performance vehicles.
The petrol versions or even the diesel, I think you're looking at 3 times the price.
Wow.
I mean, I know I've got an app that follows all that and that I look at the cost of fuel because obviously you can buy cheaper fuel, but we're talking about 98 RON petrol
yes,
or whatever.
Of course. Or diesel cars need better fuel.
Yeah, compared to them, it's a third of the price. You've still got the performance. The Model 3 range, I've got the performance pack on it, so it's 370 kilowatt, almost 500 horsepower, so it's quite significant power and 4-wheel drive as well. So it's significant grip. So I don't think there's any step back in performance there.
About your Adelaide trip, because that's the kind of thing that a lot of people don't believe is actually possible to do in an electric car.
That's true. Obviously, we thought about it because we bought the car a little bit skeptical and then we did a few short trips and realized actually this is pretty good. And then we've done longer and longer trips. So we thought we'll actually open the supercharger in Hay. So Hay, New South Wales was like the missing link because we prefer to do Tesla charging. Obviously, we've got a Tesla. It's the most reliable. They've got more charging points. It works perfectly with the car. So that meant we could go Sydney to Adelaide. Now, you can do it all in one hit. By my calculations, well, on Google Maps says it takes 16 hours, 30 minutes, the way we went, which is not the fastest way, but it's the way we went through the Barossa Valley. So we took approximately that sort of time, I think maybe half an hour longer. We did stop in country South Australia. We ended up staying just after Renmark. It's called Barmera. So it's just before the Barossa Valley, because that was like a 14-hour drive, which I did that myself. That's the RAA charger there.
Good network. We drove around South Australia just after Easter this year. We drove from Melbourne along the coast road. RAA network with the Kempower chargers is very reliable.
It's good to have that as an option. Obviously, I think at the time there was only 3 superchargers, like Tesla superchargers in the whole of South Australia.
Yep.
They've put in a couple more since, but they need, obviously, it's a big state. And if you're traveling around, you need something. And good on them for putting in some infrastructure. And that's why we stayed in that town, because we knew there was this charger and there was the one in our accommodation as well. Now, the one in the accommodation was actually offline, but I knew this was 500 meters down the road. So I always have a plan B. And that's one thing I always do. With Tesla, not so much, but when you've got other networks, you never know. Like NRMA, a little porous in New South Wales for their charges.
Some of them are quite old, to be fair, and they're replacing them. I think they've replaced NRMA Karua recently. They replaced Murray Bridge in South Australia. So yeah, bit by bit. So it's not cheap. The NRMA is replacing their older chargers.
Yeah, it's true. There are some of the older tritium ones. I got caught out in Jindabyne once there. It was, at that stage, it was free, but then it didn't work as well. And luckily where I was staying, we had a power point. So I knew that was always a backup, which we were there for 2 days anyway. So it didn't really matter. That's a Tail and Bend, that one. This one is on the road to Horsham. And so we stopped at, when we left Adelaide, we went down through McLaren Vale and along Glenelg, the coast before that. And then we went through Murray Bridge. And then we stopped at Tail and Bend just to tank it up. That's not a bad setup because it's got the servo and everything there, facilities. And then the next stop was Horsham. And that's about a 3-hour drive, which you can do. It's quite a hike. The speed limit in South Australia is 110.
Also, I should point out to anyone who's trying to drive into Adelaide that altitude changes make a big difference, whether it's going up a mountain or through the Adelaide Hills.
I found that as well. Yeah, there was, and also wind, because when I was traveling across the Hay Plain, there was a 100 kilometre-hour crosswind and at times a headwind. Wow. And Tesla does have this so-called autopilot, which more or less holds as like a cruise control with auto steer, which actually was in those conditions because it was about the only thing keeping it on the road, because these gusts would come and you had to keep it on the road. And obviously you're going at 110 or whatever. And then from time to time, you have to overtake these road trains, which are between 30 to 60 meters long, which is like between 10 cars or long. A bit of an overtake. With an EV, as they can accelerate. So it's handy for zipping by. I think when we're heading into the headwind, you can tell watt hours per kilometer. At times we were burning 220, which, I mean, if you're driving some other car, that might sound like not too bad. But for a Tesla,
it's about 60 more than you would on average usually. It mentions 220. A lot of other cars divide that number by 10. So they would show it as 22 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers.
So on average, the car would do about 170 watt hours per kilometer. That's the Model 3. And then interestingly, the Model Y does one closer to 160, which is weird because it's a bigger car.
Yeah.
But somehow, I don't think it's probably done as many Ks maybe, but when we went to Tweed Heads and back, on our average was 161, which was, I thought, pretty good for a large thing like that with massive battery. But obviously to Adelaide, we had some gusty stuff, and obviously the speeds at times, like you might have been a bit faster, and then the headwind and all that. And there are some hills, the Adelaide Hills.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the Model Y. So that's showing it there. So I've got it down the bottom there. You can see Tweed, since birth, I've got 161 and Tweed Heads was 162. This is watt hours per kilometre. 1,800 kilometre trip, the Tweed Heads one.
You mentioned previously when we were talking, the difference that was made by adding tow bars and other items.
That's right. Probably the tow bar in my case is not for towing. It's more for a bike rack.
Correct.
I have bikes and I've got mountain bike, but I've got road bikes. And we did a trip once to Jindabyne with 3 guys, and we had you put 3 bikes, 3 carbon bikes, like the bike's less than 10 kilos. It does affect your range. And typically if I was going to Jindabyne, I'd only need to stop once, maybe in Canberra for a bit of a top-up charge. But in this case, we stopped twice because just the wind, and there was a lot of wind as well, but I think the aero design is wrecked. So aerodynamics is a factor.
I think you said that it's better for aerodynamics efficiency to have the bikes behind the car rather than on top.
That would definitely
also
be
for safety.
For safety, because I think there's people that drive into garages with bikes on their roof. Not that I've ever done that. And then I've had a bike pop off at 110 because of the wind and whatever. And it's just easier manipulating bikes at a lower. And a tow bar, even though it's not a standard thing on a Tesla Model 3, you can get it on Model Y, but at the time I had to get it fitted. I mean, it works. It's perfectly fine for bike racks. I mean, if you're towing caravans, I don't know about that, but obviously that's a whole controversial topic in itself, towing. I think the fact is probably not many people actually tow much anyway. It's like people want 1,000-kilometre range. They want a car that can do the Udanet track and whatever. You've never done it. You've never been across the Nullarbor, but they insist they want that as a feature.
Yes.
I think you're going to be hard-pressed even finding a conventional car that could do any of that anyway. And if it was, then it would probably be the small that you can't even park in a shopping centre. Yeah, so horses for courses. But yeah, we've done a few road trips. We've done 20,000 in the Model 3 and the Model Y. Maybe it's 7,000. Yeah, so not as many in that car, but we've had a taste. And over the years, I've done trips, and I think we were talking before the stops that I've done in the past, like going to Threadbow. We used to stop 3 or 4 times anyway, but some people might say they never stop, or they only stop for 5 minutes for petrol, which that might be true, but in reality, you probably pull over somewhere and then have a snack or whatever, go to the bathroom. So that's really a stop, isn't it? It depends how you're calculating, but with a charger, you're calculating by the minute how long you're actually there for. And time flies. When we stopped at Tail and Bend, we're actually there for like 25 minutes or something. It's actually time to get it to my wife. It's time to get in the car. And she said she felt rushed. We'd actually eaten. She felt a bit rushed getting in the car because the car was saying, Tesla says the car's almost ready. And we were even putting a bit extra in because of the wind, the 100K wind. We wanted to have some extra. So I was taking it up to 90% to be sure. And so we even allowed a little bit extra time, but still she felt rushed.
It's good to get a bit of extra charge if you're going to be going up hills or mountains, facing crosswinds. I think a common area for that is at west of Melbourne, going towards the South Australia border. It's quite common to get crosswinds or strong headwinds. Some people try and get to each charger with 5-10% left, but even if you're going between Tesla chargers, purely between them each other, and they're very reliable, you never know if it's going to pour with raining or anything like that, which will reduce your efficiency. So it's good to have a buffer.
People could have run their petrol down. Like my mother used to like to drive with the light on, like the fact that it was almost empty. But I think on a road trip, you can run out, and typically with an EV, as you'd know, you'd want to run it down to a point. There's no point arriving with 60%. I would say I'll be looking at below 20 is my aim, like 20 or even 10, I'll be quite comfortable. I've taken it down to 9, probably the lowest I've done ever. And I'm still quite comfortable because obviously as you're at the bottom of the pack, you get the fastest charging rate. So it's going to charge faster at that rate. So obviously the trip planning software is in its mind. It's pretty good. There's times we need to help it out a little bit. It obviously seems to be attracted to certain charges that we probably you could choose a better one. You can modify all that, but I think mostly it chooses pretty well the choices, and it wants to maximize your range and efficiency.
I think your advice is good for Teslas and for viewers who aren't familiar with different brands of electric cars. Have exclusive access to all Tesla branded fast chargers. Other brands of electric cars like mine, the MG4, have access to about half the Tesla chargers and other open access brands. So while Alex is quite correct, you can go down pretty low, 10, 15, 20% if you have a Tesla. I think if you have a different brand that has access to fewer fast chargers, leave a bit more of a buffer, because there are still plenty of places in Australia where there might be just, say, one NRMA charger. And if there's a problem with that, you need to be able to get to the next one. Luckily, also, as Alex said, there's new fast chargers being opened all the time. And thanks to government incentives, especially in New South Wales, Tesla's opening up a lot of new fast chargers and opening up access to a lot of their older fast chargers to all brands of electric cars. As an example, for our Christmas trip coming up, a family trip down to Western Melbourne from Sydney, we're probably going to stop at Tesla Campbelltown just to buy something in the nearby area, and Tesla Yass. We'll stay overnight at Albury. We'd go and explore away from the highway for a bit, then stop at maybe Wagga, Tesla Kilmore. You can do that whole trip just with Tesla chargers now. open access ones in a non-Tesla, which you could not do 2 years ago. It was a lot harder.
And your charge port, is that on the right side or the wrong
It's
side?
on the street parking side if you're parallel parked to the
So
street,
that's the
which
right.
is the MG port.
I think it's sensible. Obviously, every manufacturer, and I think you've covered this in one of your YouTube videos, that they mix them around a bit. Obviously, Tesla set up their network for Teslas. I think they had plans to share it, but I don't think any of the other manufacturers were interested at the time. But now they've become more interested. Some manufacturers have adopted a similar connection point to Tesla. There are other choices. In the rest of the world, there's a lot of other choices, but here we're a little bit limited at the moment. So you don't need DC all the time, but it helps to speed it up a bit maybe. But I think if you're strategic.
Accommodation charging is also important,
That's
which
true.
you've explained as well. Overnight to 100% is a great idea.
Yeah, I think it's very convenient and usually very reasonable. It's free.
Reasonable small challenge.
A lot of older Tesla, maybe it's a good thing for Tesla owner, but a lot of those hotels have a Tesla charger. Some of them have been there for 2 or 3 years, and usually they're the older ones, and usually they're locked to Tesla, which in some ways is good because no one else can use it but Tesla. And often they haven't worked out how they're going to monetize it, so it's just free. But I have stayed in some hotels where it's basically on your Tesla account, it's linked to your Tesla account, and so basically you just plug it in, and that's just applied to your Tesla account in the hotel.
Awesome. Altitude changes make a big difference to EVs going uphill. They're a lot more thirsty, and then going downhill, you'll regain a lot of energy back into the battery with regenerative braking.
We found with the Thredbo trip, for example, on the way up to Thredbo, we overcharged. Since they've opened the one in Southern Forest, I would just charge there, even though it's a bit early. I would charge there and then get all the way to Cooma and then charge in Cooma. And then I'd overcharge in Cooma. I'd take it to 90%. So by the time I get there, I've got 40% at least or more. But on the way back, we charge at the hotel for free and we leave there with 100% right in the accommodation.
Perfect.
Now
Yes,
we can get
let's
all
pause
the
for
way.
a second there. That's also a really good point for EV road tripping. I think a lot of new EV drivers get a bit paranoid about never charging their car past 80%. I think it looks like you probably agree that when you're going on road trips and charge to 100% if you can at your accommodation overnight every time and the day before you leave on day one, and it'll save you a lot of time and money as well.
Obviously, if it's free or included, a lot of the time they don't even know how to bill it in the accommodation. It's too complicated for them to calculate how much you used or didn't use. It's probably increasing it over time, but they just include it.
I think it's fair to pay a fee if the fee is asked.
Whatever they say, we just pay it. It's usually nominal. Even if you're paying the most expensive electricity, it's about a third of the price of petrol. So on the way back from charging or from the hotel, we can get all the way back to Sally's Corner, which is Sutton Forest, on one charge, and we still got there with 20%. So from the Thredbo Hotel. So we obviously down the hill, we use gain power on the way down.
Yes.
We were thinking, we'll just top it up in Canberra, but they didn't need to. So then we went to, well, maybe Goulburn. No. Okay. So we've still got 20%. Oh, look, we've got to have something to eat now because we're starving. So we've actually got to have some human stuff. So that's what we did. And the car, when we got there, said, you need to charge for 8 minutes. No, we're actually going to stop for 25 minutes because we got to eat. So we end up overcharging like for 90% or something because it was parked there. We're eating a pie and
yes, good pies.
Convenient. But yeah, so they had the bray pies. So they're quite good. And yeah, so on the way back down the hill is ridiculous, but obviously up the hill. But as I said, I was overcharging, but you never know what you're in for. I've had all sorts of conditions up there where it's frozen.
Yes.
We've got the car's effectively 4-wheel drive, so I'm not too worried, but I do have carry chains as well, just in case, but
good idea.
Yeah, I know. In Norway, you've got Bjorn Nygaard or whatever, I follow him. It's frozen wasteland. They're busy driving EVs everywhere. It's not a problem.
Yes.
In Sydney, we're not facing harsh conditions and even Thredbo's not that harsh.
Correct. Awesome. Catch you later and happy EV road tripping.
Take care.
Please like and subscribe so I can make more videos like this for you. Thanks and see you later.